2 weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal reported on a company ditching Salesforce and vibe coding a CRM from scratch. Is this the beginning of a horror story? Maybe, just maybe. In this video, the horror story of the week, we discuss three things. Why is this vibe coding very familiar to the 1980s Excel and Visual Basic problem? It seems to us that history is repeating itself. Number two, what happens when everybody in your organization starts to do everything simultaneously? And number three, what you should be actually telling your customers before they make that call on Tuesday afternoon. I read something that would definitely categorize as an absolute horror story, not for the customer and not for the end user, but the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal, by the way, have got a brilliant team that write about artificial intelligence and technology. It turns out that a company called Carbonet, ran by Chief Operating Officer Bill Schonbrun, that sounds Dutch, must have ancestry, Schonbrun, Mr. Bill Schonbrun, was implementing Salesforce, and they realised that Salesforce was not fit for purpose. Now, I don't know how much it was going to cost in terms of configuring or bringing in a consultancy to do this for them. They vibe coded a solution. Now, this is not a small company. This is a big company. What the hell does this mean for Salesforce and software tool providers who have something generic? And we all know that generic software is easy to sell. License. What does it mean when that gets interrupted? This sounds like a horror story for them unfolding before our very eyes.
This is the narrative that's going around the investment world, right? Salesforce is toast because people are vibe coding solutions. But I'm getting a sense of deja vu here, which is when I started in the industry, there were all basically we're going in a big circle, right? So now you've got Salesforce and someone says, hey, I can vibe code something. And 20 other people say I can vibe code something. And then you've got this complete mess. There will be a complete mess because there'll be different databases, or, maybe they're talking the same data. I don't know, but there'll be some sort of mess. And eventually someone will say, well, we need something to tie all this together. So we need to hire a consultancy to come in and figure out with their clever AI tools or whatever, how to make this into one thing.
Is this not the same mistake that cloud made 15
Yeah,
years
I'm
ago?
sure we saw the same. Well, any new technology.
It goes back further. Steve Freeman, a friend of mine, was writing on LinkedIn the other week about Excel. And so Excel arrived, and then so too did Visual Basic. So people like you and I, or James and Kate in our finance team, could hack together solutions, which they did. It's like, wow, I've been able to close the books quicker. But one hack became another. There was no source control, there was no testing. And so these scripts spread like a weed, until eventually a consultancy was brought in to clean it all up, and then another company productized the whole thing and sold the product back to the company. It would have been much cheaper and more effective to have done it right from the very start. And what Steve's saying is what we saw in the 1980s is about to happen again, with all of these companies vibe coding their way into bespoke solutions that just won't scale and just don't are just not versioned properly.
That was my first job in the industry, was writing Lotus 123 macros.
What do you say, vibe coding?
Well, yeah, I mean hacking. I bought a book on Visual Basic as well. I remember £50 it cost me, absolute fortune then. And I remember sort of desperately reading it before I went into the office. And that's how I got started. And there's engineers today who are vibe coding stuff, and they will learn, and they will learn the lessons of what they're doing if they're smart, and eventually, become the engineers of tomorrow. They'll be AI native.
Yeah.
Now you've teed me up, Ian. You've teed me up, because in this section of the podcast, we talk about horror stories. We started by talking about a potential horror story for Salesforce, but what about our customers? Are they about to make that fatal mistake as well? Are they going to vibe code their way into the cloud, into some Terraform scripts, and will they have to call us in 6 months and end up spending more money on companies like ours fixing that stuff? And if they are going to do that, how can we stop them doing that?
I've got a slightly different angle on this, which I'm sure Ian will come with his angle after. I think not necessarily with our customers, that is in our customer base, but I think across businesses worldwide, investments have been made in AI, which are sat on top of previous investments that aren't necessarily done properly. So, as I said before, we've gone through sort of the age of the computer, and then the internet came along, which connected the computers, and then you come up with the cloud, which is kind of centralized infrastructure, and now AI sits across that and can think for us. Companies that haven't necessarily embraced cloud in the way that maybe they should have, or they've done part of the journey, or they haven't completed the transformation, and now investing in AI because shareholder pressure, peer pressure, keeping up with Jones Limited. That means that suddenly they're not necessarily getting the value out of the use case that they thought they had, which they presented to the board. And we know that our customers are bringing us in to help solve some of their problems with their platforms, so that not necessarily so they can leverage the value of the AI use case, but it's certainly shone a microscope onto, hey, we're not quite set up as we should be here. We thought we'd done cloud when we probably haven't quite done cloud. We now need to sort of review that so we can move forward with gusto.
I agree completely. We're already seeing the signs of companies coming to us, and while we help them with other cloud, with other platform challenges, and then realizing that it's that our data platform isn't correct, or our teams aren't talking to each other, and we need to integrate them together. And it's the same pattern we saw with cloud. They get started on their own, and then they realize they need to do this in a more thoughtful way.
What is our advice? Is it the vanilla ice advice?
What's the vanilla ice advice, Jamie?
Stop, collaborate, and listen.
Stop.
I'm not actually joking.
Stop, collaborate, and reach out to Container Solutions.
Joking aside, we've been doing this. So why do people love Container Solutions? The amount of times I've gone into a meeting and said, stop what you're doing, just stop and think for a second, let's talk. Is this what we need to do? Do people just need to stop and say, take a breath and take stock of where they actually are? Because that's what I find is people start with the vision of the future and then get confronted with their ugly reality. Professional strategists start with an understanding of their reality, and from that point plot the future path. Is that our stock advice now? Think carefully.
A little bit. I think there's a budget conversation, right? I think there's businesses that do a very good job of this stuff, right? So you can't generalize, but I think there's a lot of businesses out there that have redirected budget to AI without understanding that there are actually material budget shortfalls in the bit they never finished. So stopping is a lot. I mean, companies won't stop because they'll be under pressure and they won't have the bravery to stop. But I think understanding the investments that have to be made to deliver the outcomes that they feel they should be getting from AI isn't always about investing in AI. And I think a lot of that budget that has been shifted into AI, actually, it never really was AI budget. A lot of that needs to be, internally rebadged as actually we need to go and fix the data pipelines. We need to go and fix. We do need to refactor those applications or whatever it might be. There's a myriad of things you could do.
There's a difference between seeing AI as a magic solution to your problems and then solving your problems, and then seeing AI as a force multiplier. That can build on those foundations to take you to the next level. And it's if you don't invest in the basics, you're done.
Thanks for watching Container Solutions TV. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube and follow Container Solutions on LinkedIn for cut down parts and weekly clips. If you want help with platform engineering, cloud native transformation, or you need to follow the money in order to change how you operate your cloud at scale, then visit our website using the links below and get in touch. We'll see you in the next episode.